underrepresentation of female athletes in women's sports, and it's unfairly framed in the media when compared to their male counterparts, which may be interpreted by the mass audience as a sign that women are inferior in the sports. As I stated earlier, Carrie Walsh and Missy May won gold in beach volleyball in the Summer Olympics, but the interviews that they attended, the questions were not asked about any of their training, about how hard they worked to get there. It was all about the future. Carrie Walsh was actually pregnant while she was in the Olympics, so the questions geared towards her were what's going to happen in the future, with your pregnancy, with your marriage. And then for the men in the Olympics, as I stated, a lot of the swimmers, when they were getting interviewed, it was how hard did you train for this? What type of training did you do? Did you change your diets? What was your regimen? So I think it's really odd that even though they're working hard and they're both in the Olympics, the females are being more geared towards questions of your marital status and babies, and they're not concerned with how hard an athlete actually has to work. Women probably have to work a lot harder than men because we're viewed as weak, and you need to show people that even though you're a female, you can still do anything a man can do. Sorry, guys. Young women are becoming more concerned with body image and appearance of an athlete and wanting to look more like them rather than train and perform like them, and this could actually be problematic for the athlete's success in the future. So you see all these magazine articles, and you want models on the cover of Cosmo or anything. You want to be like them, but women in the athlete world are viewing these women as they're really fit, they have a nice beach body. And instead of trying to train like them and get like them, all they want to do is look like them instead of being an awesome athlete like them. And that's becoming a problem because it's becoming an unattainable image for those women, for those young girls. Younger women don't have the same muscle definition, or they're not as strong as when you age. So they're getting this unattainable image that if they don't reach that image, they're going to become frustrated, and they're not going to understand why they're not looking like these women, when all they should be really focusing on is how awesome that athlete is, all the training they put in, and the time and effort they put in that sport to get where they got today. Gender also affects an athlete's future, and colleges are a large part of that. In today's world, female athletes are learning the hard way that even if they train harder than their male counterparts and outperform males, they will not receive the same recognition or money that men make. For example, last year Tiger Woods was the highest paid male, earning $75 million a year, but the highest paid female was Maria Sharapova. She's a tennis player, and she was only earning $25 million a year. So right there, just because he's male, same thing in the business office, males are receiving a better pay than women are, even though they were playing different sports. She's probably the best at tennis, he's one of the best golfers. They should be making roughly the same amount of money, even though their sports are different. It's silly that gender is affecting how much they're getting paid. Also, according to the Women's Sports Foundation, male athletes receive $179 million in scholarship every year. So that's a ton more than females are making. Also, college institutions spend 24% of their athletic operating budget on female sports, 16% for recruiting budgets, and 33% of scholarship budgets on females. So women are only getting 24%, and that's for equipment, uniforms, traveling, while men are getting the other 76% of all budgeting. There may be, football teams, there's a lot more of them compared with all the other women's sports, but I feel that everything should be equalized between budgeting for these sports. It shouldn't matter that it's females that are getting, or it shouldn't matter that females are the ones getting paid less. It should be an equal division of how many female teams you have and how many male teams you have, and divide it that way instead of just saying girls get less because they're females and they don't need as much, which is untrue because equipment for volleyball goes down a lot faster than equipment for football can. Same thing with softball, baseball. They both need bats and balls, and softball bats and baseball bats cost a lot of money, but if you're only receiving that much, then the athlete themselves are going to have to pay their own way for equipment. 40% of sport and physical activity participants are women, and only 6 to 8% of total media sports coverage is devoted to women's sports. So less than 0.5% of participation in sports are females, and then they're only receiving a small percentage of media coverage. again, going back to Carrie Walsh and Misty May, if you didn't watch the Olympics, you might not have known that they won. They weren't on a lot of TV shows. There were things on the internet and the news, but little clips of what they have done and accomplished. Whereas Michael Phelps and Ryan Lochte were getting a ton of coverage from everywhere. And they're on the cover of magazines, on the cover of any newspaper article. So it just shows that sports coverage is not devoted to women's sports as much as it is to men's. Men can be affected by discrimination as well. At some workout facilities, women have workout rooms that are dedicated to themselves only. Gold's Gym, that was located off of Black Road, had a women's only workout room, and the rest of the gym was dedicated to anyone. But that's because they felt that they were intimidated by men and they wanted a more private room to work out in. So, men weren't gawking at them and they weren't being bothered. But men could feel the same way to women, like they need to work out, or they need a private room so they can work out instead of focusing on looking good for the women who are there. The past efforts that have come about is the Fair Play Bill. The Washington State Governor, Chris Gregory, signed into law in April of 2009, and it's a bill to prohibit sex discrimination in public community sports programs, and is part of he is a part of the American Civil Liberties Union of Washington, and they actually formed a partnership with the Women's Sports Foundation to help raise awareness for equal treatment of women and girls in sports. I think this is great because it focuses on how girls, I think this is actually a great bill because they're not specifically saying that everything needs to be about women. They're just saying that there needs to be more equal treatment towards women. So I guess it does focus on women and girls, but they're trying to get equal for everybody. So that's a really huge thing because boys and girls, they're the same when they're younger. They want to play with everybody, and it's unfair that the boys are getting better soccer fields, better uniform equipment, just better playing ability as well. The girls are just getting pushed to the side, handing the leftovers or the hand-me-downs. The next quote is from Senator Jean Cole-Wells. She said, "Girls who participate in sports have high levels of confidence and self-esteem, lower levels of depression, and a better body image." So this statement is excellent because it focuses on girls and how they feel about themselves as a person, not just the fact that they get to participate in the same activities as boys. So she's focusing on letting girls play sports. They're going to be more confident, they're going to have higher self-esteem, and they're just going to feel better about themselves. When you exercise, you release endorphins that make you happy. So when you're happy, you're obviously going to feel a lot better about yourself. And being included, you feel really good as well. Like, I wanted to play football when I was younger, and my mom said no because I was too small, but just getting to play with the boys in the backyard, I felt better because they were including me in anything I wanted to do. Another effort is that they're making parents aware of sexual harassment and discrimination. Parents should be a large part of any program that they put their child in, and they need to know policies and procedures before enrolling those children in those programs. Background checks and coaches are becoming more common, especially since the Jerry Sandusky went down last year. That was a huge issue, so I'm sure they're going to get a lot more strict with how they're going to do background checks and make sure that they're not only checking coaches but volunteers and any parents that are going to be there as well, just to make sure there's no chance of this happening again in the future. Parents need to educate themselves and their children and tell their children that it's okay to say no. Normally when you're younger, your parent says, do whatever your aunt says, do whatever your coach says, do whatever your teacher says. But you need to let your child know that in certain instances, they need to say no, and they need to know what is inappropriate and how to handle that. If anything happens, they need to come and tell you right away. You also need to be aware of warning signs of possible sexual harassment or abuse and find recommendations on how to deal with it, how to report it, and how to help your child deal through this. Some recommendations I did find is that park districts need to implement policies and procedures about sexual harassment and discrimination that are, like I said, more strict, and they're not going to let anything slip through the cracks. They need to find ways to prevent this, and they need to be aware of the signs if a child has been abused or discriminated against, left out in any way. They need to have a proper procedure on reporting abuse to program and policies. not least. They need to have courses on how to handle children properly. Before I went into teaching, we had to go to a Children of God class, and it taught you the proper ways to interact with children. You're not supposed to, put your hand on your back. You're supposed to, use an elbow, not give any hugs. Obviously, no inappropriate touching. But I think there really needs to be a huge part in those classes that tell you the right way to interact with children, because sometimes you think a little kid's sad, give them a hug, everything's better, but that could be viewed as inappropriate, especially if you're ever dealing with children that have special needs. They interact a lot differently, but you still need to understand that there's a fine line between how to interact with them and not. I also think there needs to be counseling that can be available to children that have had sexual harassment, discrimination, or abuse happen to them. That way they have a safe place to talk about it, and the parents can even be involved in that. To reduce discrimination, people need to start supporting women by attending their sporting events more often, encourage media to cover women's sports, recognize women's achievements,